So I want you to picture this scenario and be really honest with yourself about how familiar it feels.
Oh, I already know where this is going.
Right. Because we've all been there. You are just absolutely crushing it at work. I mean, you're hitting every single one of your numbers. You're usually ahead of schedule. You are, you know, executing flawlessly on literally every project they hand you.
Yeah, your annual performance reviews are glowing.
Exactly. They're filled with all those comments about your reliability, your work ethic. You are doing exactly what you are hired to do, and frankly, you're doing it better than almost anyone else in your department.
Which is great, except
Except you are completely stuck. That promotion you've been eyeing, that bump to VP or senior director or whatever the next rung on the senior leadership ladder is for you, it just keeps going to someone else.
and it's usually someone down the hall who, let's be honest, maybe doesn't even hit their functional metrics as perfectly as you do.
Right. And you're sitting there just staring at your spotless track record, feeling entirely invisible and having absolutely no idea why the door refuses to open.
It's a uniquely isolating frustration, really. You feel like you've solved the professional puzzle perfectly, right? You
Yes.
matched all the colors, you aligned all the pieces, but the mechanism just simply will not unlock.
Yeah, and the natural human instinct in that moment is to just assume the system is broken or, I don't know, biased or just purely political,
Oh, absolutely. You just think, well, the game is rigged.
which is the exact frustration we are tackling in today's deep dive. We're looking at this deeply revealing piece of writing by executive coach and leadership advisor Booker Ferrier. It's called The Hidden Scorecard.
It's such a brilliant framing of the problem.
It really is. And our mission today is to essentially make the invisible visible for you. We're going to unpack exactly why performance alone, meaning just doing your job exceptionally well, suddenly stops working as currency at those senior levels.
And crucially, how you can actually learn to read the new rules of the game that's being played around you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core problem here, the real realization you have to come to terms with, is that the system you thought you were playing, the game you've been winning this whole time, it's it's not the system evaluating you anymore.
Yeah, that is the pivotal realization. And man, it is incredibly disorienting. Up until this plateau in your career, the rules have been entirely straightforward, right? Very linear.
Do good work, get promoted.
Exactly. But Ferrier lays this out by explaining that at senior levels, there isn't just one monolithic scorecard that everyone looks at. There are actually two parallel evaluation systems running simultaneously in literally every room you enter.
The tale of two systems. So let's break down the first one, which Ferrier calls System 1, or the stated system.
Right, the one we all know and love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's comfortable. It's deeply ingrained in us from our very first day of school. System 1 is all about delivering results. It's hitting your quotas, executing your responsibilities, just checking off the tactical boxes.
It encompasses everything that gets formally discussed in your standard HR-mandated annual performance review. Did you increase departmental efficiency by 10%? Did you launch the software update on time?
It's highly visible and it's heavily quantifiable. And importantly for you listening, System 1 is the exact mechanism that got you promoted in the first place.
Right, you were the best at executing the raw work, so they made you a manager of the people doing the work.
And then you were the best at managing that execution, so they made you a director.
We've all been heavily conditioned by years and years of positive reinforcement to believe that System 1 is just the entire universe of professional value.
And what's fascinating here is the danger of that conditioning, because it completely blinds you to the reality of senior leadership. While you're pouring all of your cognitive energy into optimizing System 1, the people actually making the promotion decisions at the highest levels, they're looking at a completely different set of metrics.
They're evaluating you on System 2, the actual system. Yeah, in a scorecard. And System 2 has almost nothing to do with whether you can execute a tactical task. As Ferrier notes, at this altitude, technical excellence is merely table stakes.
Like they already assume you could do the job.
Exactly. The executives already know you can do the job. That's literally why you are in the room. System 2 evaluates something much more abstract. It evaluates how you think when the answer isn't clear.
Oh, that's a big shift.
It really is. It evaluates what you choose to prioritize when everything feels intensely urgent and the company is under pressure. It's about, how you frame arguments in the rooms where the real decisions get made. And fundamentally, it measures who the senior team trusts when the stakes are incredibly high and the data is incomplete.
It makes me think of an analogy.
Mm.
Imagine you've been playing this complex video game for years, right? And the entire stated goal, the way you get high scores, is to run around and collect as many gold coins as possible.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right, and you are incredible at it. You are the top coin collector on the global leaderboard. But halfway through the game, without any notification whatsoever, the win condition secretly changes.
Just completely flips on you.
Yeah, it goes from collect the most coins to engage in complex diplomatic negotiation to prevent a digital war.
And that psychological trap is just brutal because no one pulls you aside and says, hey, just so you know, we're now evaluating you on your diplomatic judgment, not your coin execution.
Yeah.
No one sends out a corporate memo announcing that the grading criteria have fundamentally shifted.
So you just keep doing what you know.
Exactly. Because System 2 is largely invisible until someone explicitly points it out to you. Most ambitious leaders just double down on what worked before. They experience the rejection of missing out on that VP role, and their internal narrative says, oh, I must need to execute even harder. I need to hit 130% of my numbers instead of 110%.
But the screen is still only showing you your coin count. I mean, the corporate interface hasn't changed. The official performance review template still only asks about the coins. So you just keep running around, frantically optimizing for the wrong objective, totally burning yourself out.
While the executives are watching you from above thinking, why is this person just mindlessly picking up coins when we desperately need them to help us draft a peace treaty?
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly it. So the leaders who break through and capture those senior roles, they aren't necessarily more capable or harder working or even smarter than you.
Not at all. They simply figured out that the diplomatic negotiation system 2 actually exists, and they shifted their energy toward optimizing for it. They learned to read the underlying psychology of the new game.
Which brings us to the most crucial pivot of this whole deep dive. Because now that you know System 2 exists, how do you actually start optimizing for it when your day-to-day job still demands System 1 execution? Like, you still have to get your work done.
You do. And Ferrier argues that it all starts internally, with this vital reframe of your own internal monologue. If you're unaware of System 2, the primary question you're constantly asking yourself is anchored entirely in System 1 thinking.
Right.
Most leaders, when they're trying to prove they're ready to move up, ask themselves a variation of, am I doing enough to get noticed?
Am I doing enough? Man, that word enough is the trap, isn't it?
It really is.
It implies volume, it implies output, endless execution, and just like aggressive visibility. You take on extra weekend projects, you respond to emails at midnight, you make sure everyone sees how breathlessly busy and productive you are. But returning to our game, that's just you aggressively collecting more coins faster. It doesn't prove you can negotiate the treaty.
It simply proves you are a highly efficient worker, which executives love to keep exactly where they are.
Okay, let me push back on this, though, or at least play devil's advocate for the listener who might be feeling a little skeptical right now.
Sure, go for it.
Let's say I actively want that VP job. If my boss asks me for a standard status update on a project, and I suddenly start waxing poetic about enterprise strategy and cross-functional synergies, aren't I going to look completely arrogant? Or worse, insubordinate?
I hear that all the time.
I mean, I'm just a director. If I start trying to do the VP's job for free, I'm going to step on my boss's toes and alienate my peers. I don't want to overstep my bounds and get labeled as difficult.
And that is a very real, very common concern. And honestly, it's a completely logical fear if you're viewing corporate dynamics purely through a System 1 lens where everyone has a rigid defined box.
Right, stay in your lane.
Exactly. But let's look at the underlying mechanism of how senior executives actually think. The decision makers are not looking for someone who could hypothetically learn to be a VP once they're granted the magical title. They are fiercely protecting their own risk. Promoting someone is a huge risk.
It makes a lot of sense.
So to mitigate that risk, they're looking for someone who is already naturally thinking at that altitude. So the question Ferrier introduces, the reframe you actually need to ask yourself is, in this moment, am I demonstrating the thinking required at the next level?
Okay, so it's about the thinking, not necessarily taking over their tasks. You aren't doing their job. You are adopting their perspective.
Precisely the distinction. You're doing it right now in this specific meeting within the boundaries of your current role. Ferrier makes this really crucial point regarding the psychology of the executive suite. Readiness is entirely subjective.
There's no rubric.
There is no mathematical formula or magical HR checklist that unequivocally proves you are ready for senior leadership. Furthermore, at the senior level, there are rarely perfect, clean answers to the problems they face.
Because if the problem had a clean, easy answer, someone 3 levels down would have already solved it. By the time an issue reaches the VP or C-suite, It is inherently messy.
Exactly. So decision makers aren't grading you on whether you possess a flawless encyclopedic answer. They're watching to see how you handle the tension of not knowing. They are looking for specific behavioral signals that prove you already operate with the mental framework of the next level up.
So let's get specific about those signals. What exactly are they secretly watching for when you speak up in a room?
Well, the source material highlights three primary behavioral indicators. First, do you frame problems at the enterprise level, or are you just fiercely protecting your specific functional silo?
Oh, that's huge.
Right. Second, do you make trade-offs explicit? Like when resources are tight, do you actually name the tension, or do you just try to please everyone and avoid the hard, uncomfortable conversation?
Just saying yes to everything.
Exactly. And third, do you demonstrate sound judgment in the face of ambiguity, or do you just sit back and wait for someone else to give you clarity and direction?
I love that second point about trade-offs
Yeah.
because executives are obsessed with resource allocation. If you pretend that every project can be done perfectly with no sacrifices, you just look incredibly naive to them. You are signaling readiness by showing you understand that strategy is fundamentally about sacrifice.
And that signaling has to happen in real time. It has to be a constant hum in your professional interactions, which honestly brings us from the overarching theory of System 2 into the actual practical application.
Right. How do you implement this without looking like you're overstepping?
Exactly.
Let's get into the action. Because internal reframing is great philosophy, but we need to know how to actually manifest this in a high-stakes environment tomorrow morning. Like, how do you transform the meetings you're already sitting in? Ferrier gives us a very specific psychological tool here, a pre-speaking checklist.
Yeah, and the instruction is conceptually simple, but practically quite demanding. In every meeting, every hallway conversation, or every decision where you have a seat at the table, you need to force a pause before you open your mouth.
And for high achievers, that pause is agonizing. Your brain is moving a million miles an hour.
Your deeply ingrained muscle memory is screaming at you to immediately jump in with the technical System 1 answer because that is how you have always added value. But in that crucial pause, you need to ask yourself three diagnostic questions. What is the enterprise level question I should be asking right now? What trade-off or tension exists in this room that no one is brave enough to name? And how would someone at the next level frame this exact same data?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because Ferrier doesn't just leave us floating with abstract questions, he gives us the exact scripts to use. The instead of versus try this scenarios, these perfectly highlight the mechanical difference between System 1 and System 2 communication.
So practical.
Let's look at Scenario 1. You're in a meeting about supply chain delays. The System 1 instinct, what like 95% of people in your position would say, is to jump in with the functional data. Here's the data on supplier performance over the last quarter, and here are the bottlenecks.
And look, that is helpful information, but it's purely functional. It's a status update. It essentially forces the executive to do the heavy lifting of figuring out why that data matters to the company's bottom line.
But the System 2 move, the way you speak, if you want to signal next level thinking, requires a reframe. Instead of just dumping data, you ask, before we optimize this supplier performance, what's the broader risk we're actually managing here?
Notice the mechanical shift in the room's dynamic when you say that. You're L-listing the conversation from a tactical data review to a strategic conversation about enterprise risk management. You are removing the cognitive load from the executive.
Oh, I see.
You're showing them you understand that the supply chain delay isn't just a logistics problem. It's a customer trust problem or a margin compression problem.
Carrying our video game analogy forward, instead of just showing the executives your coin count, you are pausing the game and explicitly asking if everyone is even in the right level of the dungeon. It changes the entire temperature of the room.
It really does.
Okay, Scenario 2. Your team is tasked with a new, complex project, and there are a couple of different paths to take. The System 1 execution-focused response is to say, my team can execute on either option, just tell us what you want.
Right, and on the surface, that sounds like you're being the ultimate team player. You're flexible, you're cooperative. But to a senior leader, it severely lacks leadership. It pushes the burden of the hard choice back up the chain of command.
Because by saying, we can do either, you're essentially dodging the responsibility of strategy. You are forcing the executives to make the hard choice for you. You're saying, I'm a good worker bee, point me at the flower.
Exactly.
But the System 2 script, the next level frame, is to say, let's clarify the trade-off here. Speed versus sustainability. Which matters more, given where we are strategically right now?
You are doing exactly what we discussed earlier. You're forcing the tension into the light. By naming the trade-off, you show the executives that you understand corporate strategy is inherently about sacrifice. We cannot have it fast, cheap, and perfect all at once. By articulating the sacrifice, you signal that you can be trusted with scarce resources. And that is exactly how a VP thinks.
All right, scenario 3. And I know every single person listening has been in this position. You're trying to hit aggressive quarterly numbers, and your team is just drowning. The classic System 1 plea is, I need more headcount to hit these goals.
Oh, yeah. It is the single most common complaint in corporate history. And to the executive sitting across the table, it is just white noise. Everyone wants more headcount. When you ask for it, you just sound like another functional manager complaining about their specific silo.
So the System 2 approach, the way to thrive inside this hidden scorecard, is to reframe the complaint into a strategic question about leverage. You say, given our competing priorities across the company, what's the highest leverage use of resources right now, and what are we willing to deprioritize?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see the underlying psychology of why these reframes work so effectively. In all three of those scenarios, you are not handing them your resume and hoping they notice your past results. You're not asking for permission to be a leader. You are actively, verbally, and confidently managing the room's perspective, rather than just managing your specific to-do list.
It is a massive paradigm shift. But, having the scripts and actually using them are two entirely different things. Ferrier acknowledges this by challenging the reader to take this on as a rigorous 90-day challenge. Commit to running this pre-speaking checklist, asking the enterprise question, naming the trade-off consistently for 90 days.
Yep.
But we need to talk about the friction here. This isn't going to be a smooth ride. What happens on day 12 when you try to name a trade-off and your boss just seems annoyed that you aren't giving a simple yes or no?
Well, the friction is the point. Ferrier emphasizes that this process will feel profoundly uncomfortable at first, and you will face resistance. You're breaking years of your own muscle memory, and you're violating the established expectations your colleagues have of you.
Right. They're used to the old you.
Exactly. People are used to you being the person with all the tactical answers. When you step out of that comfort zone and into the ambiguous space of being a strategic leader, it creates turbulence. Your boss might be confused at first. You might phrase the trade-off clumsily on day 15.
The temptation to revert back to System 1, just to feel the dopamine hit of crossing a task off a list and making someone happy, is going to be incredibly strong.
Extremely strong. But the persistence through that 90-day period is where the alchemy happens. Because the ultimate payoff of this challenge isn't merely about manipulating how the executives view you.
It changes you internally.
Fundamentally, if you force yourself to do this consistently, you systematically change how you view your own value. You stop identifying as a high-level executor who is waiting for a grade, and you start identifying as an enterprise leader who shapes outcomes.
That's powerful.
It is. The practice compounds. By acting the part through your language, you mentally become the part. The imposter syndrome begins to dissolve because you realize the executives don't have magical answers either. They just have a better framework.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize everything Ferrier's unpacking for us in the hidden scorecard, it essentially boils down to one foundational truth told through three distinct phases: navigate, lead, and thrive.
Spot on.
First, you navigate by waking up to the reality that the rules of the game have expanded. You have to accept the existence of the hidden scorecard, System 2, and stop being angry that System 1 isn't enough anymore. Second, you lead by demonstrating the thinking required for the next level, long before you ever possess the title. You stop asking if your volume of work is enough, and you start asking if your altitude of thinking is high enough. And finally, you thrive by actually practicing that reframe out loud in your meetings, weathering the discomfort, until that next level framing becomes your absolute baseline instinct.
Underlying all of these tactical shifts is a much deeper philosophy regarding extreme career ownership. Ferrier reminds the reader of a harsh but liberating reality. CEOs do not wait to be chosen. They do not sit quietly at their desks hoping someone taps them on the shoulder because they diligently collected enough coins.
They write their own job descriptions.
They outline the vision for the future. They influence the terms of the engagement. They take complete, unapologetic ownership of their professional trajectory. If you want to reach that level of senior leadership, you have to apply that exact same CEO mindset to the management of your own career. You have to stop waiting for HR or your manager to grant you permission to lead.
It is an incredibly empowering shift in perspective. It moves you from being the passive victim of a murky, subjective promotion process to being the active driver of your own strategic value in the marketplace.
It absolutely does. But this raises an important question, one that goes slightly beyond the immediate optimistic promise of the source text, but builds directly on the often messy reality of corporate dynamics.
I'm intrigued.
Let's say you take on this 90-day challenge. You commit to it fully. You push through the friction. You successfully begin thinking, communicating, and framing every problem at an enterprise level. You master System 2 completely, but your current company still refuses to acknowledge your growth.
Yeah.
Maybe the organizational culture is irredeemably toxic, or perhaps the roles above you are simply bottlenecked by people who are never going to leave.
Which is a reality for a lot of people listening. You can do everything right, and the environment simply cannot accommodate your growth.
Exactly. So, does optimizing your mind for System 2 actually serve a vital dual purpose? You are preparing yourself for a promotion internally, yes. But by forcing yourself to elevate your thinking and seeing the entire enterprise clearly, do you simultaneously begin to realize that your true value might only be recognized by taking that newly forged next-level mindset to an entirely different organization?
Wow. In other words, learning to read the hidden scorecard doesn't just show you how to win the specific game you're currently in. By elevating your perspective, it might reveal that you have actually outgrown the game entirely, and it's finally time to find a new board to play on. That is a deeply provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. You aren't just leveling up your thinking for their benefit, you are leveling up for you. Keep navigating the hidden systems, keep leading from where you are, and keep thriving in the ambiguity.